which I don't disagree with, instead of putting it in the Farm Bill, which is Senate Bill 455. There is one person in general that is the sponsor of Senate Bill 711 that is also the chair of the Rules Committee where 455 is sitting. So I've almost cast my business aside for the past 6 months or more to make sure that I had a business legally. And I know some people are okay with operating in the gray areas of cannabis because that's how cannabis has always been, but there are so many stakeholders involved. I have 3 investors, so for every one hemp business owner, there's likely 3-4 stakeholders on top of all of their consumers. So the far-reaching implications of basically trying to abolish an industry overnight are pretty catastrophic to a lot of people involved. And no matter what happens, I can assure you that hemp is not going anywhere in North Carolina. Regardless of whether nothing happens or not, we're still going to have an industry. We're going to keep going. And what's happening now is criminal. So if you live in the South, if you live in North Carolina, if you live in a different state, it's really important to understand that cannabis-infused product sales means hemp and marijuana, and I believe a lot of that has to do with Delta-8. Right now these legislators, you have a hemp industry that's able to use Delta-8 and other intoxicating substances, and then you're trying to highly regulate a marijuana industry. So the only logical thing that's going to happen is that, hey, the marijuana guys are saying this is not fair. If you get to sell Delta-8 and it's intoxicating, then we're going to take that too. And so if you care about legislation, if you live in North Carolina right now, the best thing you can do is contact your Senate members, ask them to pass Senate Bill 455, beg them to pass Senate Bill 455, and that's all I'm going to say right now.
And when they first did the wording with Senate Bill 711, you're right, it is set up like a corporate takeover because,
Absolutely.
but they love to sugarcoat it in North Carolina. The one thing the NCGA is really good at is trying to play the spin game, because when they first introduced it, they said that, well, the reason that we've done this is because we want to get it right. We don't want to do like other states that have a failed marijuana program, municipally speaking. So let's bring in representatives from legal states with at least 6 years of experience that have that experience in a medicinal or recreational market, partner them with local people that are applying for the license to make them able to qualify. Now, the way they originally worded it was they said, oh, you'll only have to set up an LLC with someone with that 6 years experience, whatever financial agreement you two come to on your own, that's fine, and then you can disband it after a few years if you want to. That was the way they made the general public think that it was going to go down. But if you're actually, someone who has suffered and will never get those moments of their life back like I have and you have, and can actually read the legalese that is North Carolina legislature, which is not easy. Those bills are a nightmare. You can see the wording for what it is. It is a way for them to keep us dying in the dark instead of allowing us to grow in the light.
So I'm going to kind of play off a couple of things Nicole said. First of all, she said that beginning July 1st, the manufacturing and processing of hemp will be a crime in North Carolina. In the 2018 Farm Bill, it essentially said that states could prohibit hemp on the state level, even though it's legal on the federal level. What's interesting about that is that North Carolina, in order to prohibit, would have to put it back onto their version of the CSA. And that process takes, you said 30 days?
I believe it's 30 days in North Carolina.
Right, so there is going to be a period where I think that these hemp companies are going to have kind of a clue as to what's going on and what direction this is going. Speaking from a tax perspective, I just don't see disallowing hemp as sustainable for North Carolina. First of all, they're realizing all of the benefits of taxing hemp and, well, not cannabis, but, and then once you take that away, I think they're going to realize how much state revenue they're losing. And then another interesting thing is I know that there's a concern on the North Carolina level about not being able to differentiate cannabis from hemp as it comes through the state. And I think that they could easily solve that issue by legalizing hemp and then using the large amount of tax money to come up with a program to differentiate those.
Oh, but we've all been told in the last 2 years that as long as you don't carry more than 1.5 ounces on you at a time, you're legal.
That's not true.
But no, you're right. There is no difference, and it was the Sheriff's Association that issued that when the Farm Bill passed in 2018, where they said there is no way that we can tell the difference between hemp and cannabis. So the possession, sight, or even the suggested possession of cannabis or hemp was no longer cause for search, seizure, and arrest. Now, if you got pulled over with a pound of THC in your trunk and tried to say that to the officer that was standing by you on the side of the road, you were going to go to jail that night. But that is what they said. They said that we will not persecute on just the possession, sight, or suspicion of hemp or cannabis because we cannot tell the difference.
Well, and they can't anyways until it's added to their CSA. I say CSA because I don't know the North Carolina version of CSA, but.
Substance
Exactly. I mean, Orange County Sheriff's Department could tell the difference when they planted it in the car.
The thing is that these DAs, whether decriminalization is in our medical marijuana bill or not, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's my understanding that it's cost between $10,000 and $15,000 to prosecute a nonviolent planned crime. So that's a lot of money in the budget that's being used to prosecute people that like plants. And so, I mean, it's true. Like, this is kind of ridiculous, guys. But, why not use that money? Because what North Carolina keeps complaining about, and I should say making an excuse about, is that, and why they're trying to regulate everything so tightly and hand it away to MSOs who they think are better at certain things, although we're the small people that are much more probably experts and passionate about what we're doing, is put that money into field tests. I mean, it's like a pH water test. Like, this is simple stuff. You could use these budgets to actually be able to buy field tests, so that's kind of a moot point. But
has anybody presented a budget for them and said this is X amount of revenue per year and that $26 million
we haven't
would pay for every county to have a few of these things?
I mean, how many tests do you really need? How many people are you really pulling over? Like, you could probably buy 10,000 tests and that'll get you through a couple of years. So this is, again, a moot point with but that is North Carolina as a very conservative state, is we can't tell the difference between marijuana and hemp. Like, okay, well, there's a test for that. I can't tell how much chlorine is in my pool, but I use a pH strip. If you have people that are committed to misunderstanding or not making something work, then you're always going to get an excuse or a result of someone that's
committed to misunderstanding.
Committed to not making it work.
Yeah, that is an issue that we deal in North Carolina with not having term limits in our NCGA, because I've had representatives come up to me on the record even and say that the whole reason they are not for cannabis legalization is because they don't want their great-grandson to open up a history book one day and see that Pop had something to do with legalizing weed. That was an actual statement that was said to me inside the NCGA by a representative.
Well, the interesting thing about the argument about transporting hemp and cannabis, and you can't tell the difference, is that the 2018 Farm Bill stated that states cannot prohibit the transfer of hemp through the state. And so, regardless of whether it's legal here or not, it has to travel through the state.
Exactly. I mean, that's the point. And I think it's really important to understand that in most states, particularly here in the Southeast, I've been on the Senate floor when they voted on SB 711. There wasn't one senator, except for Senator Julie Mayfield out of Buncombe County, go Asheville, that had any amount of knowledge as to hemp, statistics. I mean, I'll do my impersonation of how this went on the floor, but it was, this is a really good bill, it's going to help so many people. And that's all that they could say on the floor. Thank you. I love that impersonation. And we're asking you, how many people? Because right now, even with the medical marijuana bill, it only helps about 3% in North Carolina. So you're giving a medical program to 10 companies that's going to help 3% of the people in North Carolina. And that sounds like a really bad business deal. So, and I think that explains too why they would be going after the hemp industry and making sure that those CBD and Delta 8 products are rolled in. But, one of the things we've also been working on is that I don't disagree that intoxicating products should be regulated. I think a lot of us might be able to agree with that on some level. But what the legislator and these legislators need to understand, and this legislation needs to reflect, is that there's a big difference between intoxicating cannabinoids and non-intoxicating cannabinoids. So however you want to flip that script, I do CBD, high-dose CBD body products. They could have a ton of THC in it, and because of how they're applied and processed by the body, you're still not going to get high. So you're trying to regulate like vitamin C or something, you know, like it's going to be completely unsuccessful.
Yeah, to that point, I mean, the way I've kind of like really just broadly broken it down as far as regulatory compliance, that we're likely, not just in North Carolina, but in other states, regulatory environments going to see 3 broad categories where you have psychoactive, recreational cannabinoids that are adult use, you know, for wellness, for recreation, for intoxication. Then you're going to have medical, which is higher dose, maybe lower age limits for patients that need higher doses and need access to those things at whatever age they're dealing with, what they're dealing with. And then you'll see what you're saying with non-psychoactive, which would be like grass substances, generally regarded as safe, with like valerian or St. John's worts or vitamin C. You can get it over, under the counter, depending on the dose, without a, you know. Yeah, exactly.
And you would think so, but the issue is that there are a number of wordings in a lot of the bills that have come across the floor where it's the actual senators that are voting on the bill that decide what conditions qualify and not the physicians. There's been wording in a number of our cannabis bills, and there's even wording including in Senate Bill 711. They gave a position on the 9-member regulatory board that will be created by 711 to a physician, but they won't let a physician say that chronic pain needs to be a qualifying condition. But they can just pick, you know, 7 random conditions. Just out of curiosity, anyone in here have wasting away syndrome? Yeah, I didn't think so. So, I mean, yeah, and glaucoma. They even took glaucoma out of it because they said, well, with glaucoma, even though we have all the research from so many years ago, it's the method that the medication is administered that we can't decide on.
Yeah. So
Senators deciding on the medical care.
Yes.
Which is, I guess, if you take it back to Anslinger and the original, that's what happened then too, is all the physicians disagree.
Well, one of my favorite comments, during the hearing that she was talking about, because I was at Senate Bill 711 as well, is Senator Harrington. She looked into everybody, and I love this because after she said what she did, she constantly kept putting the microphone to her mouth, going on, motion to vote. Like she was trying to push the bill, all of a sudden she couldn't keep talking. But she said in the introductory notes, if you had asked me about this bill 4 years ago, I would have said no. But now that my husband has had melanoma skin cancer, I can see where this would help people.
well, look, let's talk about that. Let's bring it back to Anslinger all at the same time here. We have a few minutes to wrap, and I want to take any questions as well. So please prepare. You can put your hand up. But you know, to that point, we're in such an interesting period of time now. You gave us kind of the history of these laws, which were, you know, it was the drug war. It was a drug war. It was kind of like war where it is profitable. Okay, and so people go to war because they have companies that build the weapons and do the things that kill the people. Kind of like the drug war. They got to keep the prisons full. They got to keep those agencies active. They got to keep moving. And now we're at this, you know, confluence point here where that continues. But now we don't just have big pharma, big alcohol, big tobacco wanting to set the rules for this. There's also big cannabis, you know, to your point, with the big cannabis companies coming in. But there's also, you know, we're not going to tear down the system and start over. I mean, that's not happening. And so you see, you know, a lot of localized industries in here, North Carolina, Virginia, all over the Southeast, all over different states that are, you know, have this opposition to the establishment. Righteously so, but there's no not working with them. There's no not working with the government. I mean, yesterday I was on a panel here, and we had a self-spoken libertarian anarchist who was saying we need the government to regulate this stuff. You know, and it's true. So it's just such a nuanced thing right now, because like the control and the greed and is like on the table, and it's kind of clear now. And so now they're like taking as much time to stall it, to get the right people in place to do the work. But at the same time, local operators like us, we can't like stop that. So it's kind of like play the game with the other man's rules and beat him at it. And so, you know, how do we do that? What are the next steps? And where do we see this in a year? Then let's open it up to questions.
What we do is what we've always had to do in North Carolina is you take the bill that you're given, not the bill you deserve. Anything can be fixed in committee afterwards. Anything can be lobbied on after it's made into a law. But if we don't get a bill passed, if we keep waiting for the perfect piece of legislation, it will not happen. So you have to take what you're willing to give as a compromise. You know, you might not agree with all the wording in the bill. That's fine. I don't agree with all the wording in a lot of the bills that I've lobbied for. But the bill needed to be passed for us to do the work behind the scenes and in the meetings that we need to have to get people to stand up and be a champion for the changes that need to occur. That's what we need to do in North Carolina, is we need to get a piece of legislation passed that we can work on.
Yeah, I'll agree with that point. I mean, the first order of operation is in the next 5 days if we want a hemp industry with our laws expiring, at least a legal one, at least one that, regardless of what happens with SB 711, like Chris said, nobody's ever going to get a perfect bill. There are things in SB 711 like no decriminalization, no mention of social equity, limited licensing structure, limited access to medical cards. So there's a lot of work to do in North Carolina, but fundamentally,
What can we do the next 5 days?
in the next 5 days, yeah.
Pay attention.
Pay attention, yeah, absolutely. You can follow the bills online at the.
Is there any action, like,
There
calls?
is.
Yes, please
455?
email your senators. It's right now, 455 is in the Senate's hands. It has already, it's literally approved by the Senate, went to the House, passed the House, and is back in the Senate. It is by far the path of least resistance. They could pass it and have it on Cooper's desk in an hour, and I already told you the reason that they're not. So
So call your representative and tell them.
Not
yes,
just call your representative, but one thing that I'm willing to offer here today as well is that there's anyone at this conference that can make it to the NCGA in the next 5 days that has never been before, that might live in a county that's too far away from Raleigh. But if this matters to you, if you can make it to the NCGA, contact me. Let me know. I will get your state representative and senator. I will do everything I can in the next 5 days to make sure to find out when they're in their office, and I will personally take you into their office so you can sit down with them and look the person in the eye that's about to decide your future. If there is anyone that wants to come to the NCGA to do more than just call or talk that's never been before or isn't sure where to go when they get there, get my information, call me. I'm going to be there every day this week as much as I possibly can. I would be more than happy to take you there personally.
Is there an organized, concerted social media outreach regarding this thing? Do you guys have?
Yeah, what's some
do you guys have
contact?
polling results that you can put against it? Because there's got to be a vast majority of people here agree
We
with
have a
this
good-
particular stance.
Oh yeah, we have a good network of people that have worked with, I know, at least my organization, I know also with NC Normal, with We Go High, with Last Prisoner Project, with a lot of different organizations, and they've shared a lot of the information they have. We do have a lot of polls, we have a lot of, trust me, there have been more things put on senators and representatives' desks in the past 8 months than probably happened in the past 4 years for people like us.
What I mean is, are people actually tagging these senators, or are they tagging things through Twitter and through?
yeah, so we actually, our group just started a website. If you go for, it's the Alliance of Cannabis Transparency, that's ACT. So if you go to www.act4nc.com, we have the bills up. There's calls to action. You can join a mailing list. Obviously, after the work is not going to stop next week, it's not going to stop for the next couple of years, actually. So there's a lot of ways to get involved. And like Chris said, I think there's going to be a demonstration next week. So if anyone is interested in making your voice heard, there's a lot of ways to do it.
And our website is down currently at the moment. I'm trying to get that fixed, but you can, any social media outlets, if you do @legalizenc_, you will be able to follow myself and the Change is Coming movement. You'll be able to see all of the grassroots campaigns we're working on for social equity and criminal justice reform, as well as any events and rallies that we have planned coming up in the next 5 days.
Despite anything that the federal government says on this, one thing to keep in mind, what we're seeing here is the exercise of the core powers of the state. These are the powers that are reserved to the states. Make sure that in North Carolina that they're exercised properly, because this is where the power is. It really truly is. When we get into the federalism dispute, we're thinking that we're going to see the Supreme Court telling the federal government to go take a hike on this stuff, and it's going to be the states that are going to be regulating this. Make sure it's done right here in North Carolina.
And I know, like me personally, one thing I've always told people when they've asked, why I keep doing this is, because they see how frustrating it is. They see how difficult it is working with the NCGA in North Carolina. And I always tell people, look, I I got hit by a car in '98 and survived. I've been shot and survived. I've been thrown off the top of something equivalent to the size of the BB&T building and survived with all the weird things I've done in my life. The NCGA is not going to be what takes me down.
Okay, well, we have a few minutes, or we can keep, there we are. Can we get some questions? Anybody here?
So how many states have y'all seen this happen in? So
Well,
All of them?
I think Florida.
I mean, 2 to 3.
37 states.
Like, there's no stopping the MSOs. That's the thing. And they're
It's
gonna
just
be
learning to play
there.
nice with it. You know, that's the thing, is we're not anti-MSO. You know, I think independent businesses in cannabis want a free market. That's what most of us want. That's why we're all in business as entrepreneurs. But if the MSOs are writing this legislation and dictating this legislation to make sure that the rules aren't fair from the start, that's what you see in North Carolina. That's what you're going to see, particularly in the Southeast. Florida's market is, I think 83% of the market is run by about 5 companies. They didn't go after hemp though. So you're gonna see you're gonna see the corporate dispensaries in almost every state.
And one thing about that is that they don't want to do what we're doing from the ground up. You know, they want to. So that's kind of the point of like co-opetition, or I like to call it the space co-op.